Hey there, folks. I'm Matt Hansen.
And I'm John Johnson.
And you're listening to Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, the podcast where we discuss favorites we've reread, comics we want to read, and everything in between.
And here's the comic we picked this week.
Welcome back to another episode of Planes, Trains, and Comic Books. I'm Matt Hansen.
I'm John Johnson.
And today we did a very interesting book. We went back to true crime. So this time we did this book called, the series is called Treasury of Victorian Murders. And what's the name of the book? It's called
The Beast of Chicago.
The Beast, that's right, The Beast of Chicago. And this is by Rick Geary, or Geary, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce it. He wrote and drew it, and it's a true crime biography book about H.H. Holmes. So that was very, very interesting book. I really liked it. What do you think, John?
I liked it a lot too. I liked that there was the disclaimer at the beginning that this is the most true story that he can get from it because it's based on a couple true, firsthand accounts that are supposedly true and the public records that are available on it.
Right. And also, this is from the 1890s, I think.
Yeah,
when it was going on.
Yeah,
so
right for the turn of the century.
So, not a lot of, not the best record keeping back then. No Twitter or or video cameras, iPhones. So, so I guess we'll tell the story of the book. Basically, it just tracks the life of H.H. Holmes as he went from birth and who his parents were and whatnot, and then how he just kind of, for some reason, because it didn't seem like he had a reason like other serial killers do, that he just went into murdering people.
Now, the only thing that I noticed when they were talking about his childhood is they said that when he was going to medical school, he did operate on and work on animals. And that is kind of one of those old,
yes, that's one of them, but usually there's family, he's got an abusive family.
Exactly,
or
trauma.
Yeah, or it just seemed like he kind of fell into it. At first it started as him conning people, and then he was like, if I con people, they find out about it, then I go to jail, so I'm going to kill them. And then it ended up being I'm going to build a murder house before any conning happens and kill those people and Yeah,
his foresight to make this murder house, we'll call it, is wild. Because the construction, everything that went into it, and his preciseness is we'll get into how it was built and how the plans are made for it. It was wild.
Yeah, one thing I liked about this book is he really focused on that murder house. I think he knew that was kind of the coolest part, or I'll say coolest, but the most interesting part of H.H. Holmes' murder spree. And so he, in the beginning pages of the book, he put a floor plan of each room and all that for each floor of that murder house. It was very cool. That was really interesting. What'd you think of the art and the writing and all that kind of stuff?
I liked it. This was a nice take from what we've read, because most of what we read, you have the characters going back and forth, and this one was strictly a telling of the story with this nice line artwork with it. Yeah,
it's like a narrator.
Exactly.
It's basically Forensic Files, but from a Mr. Rogers. This is kind of how I picture it. I'm just going to tell this nice story, and it just happens to be about a murderer.
Yeah, because even when the murders happen, you don't necessarily feel you're whoa, I can't believe he did that, but you're not oh, that's horrible, gruesome. It's horrible.
It was so calm, the art style was so oh, this happened, the writing was this happened, and the art was and there's some stuff, but it wasn't super graphic.
Yeah,
it just had a good flow, but that actually made it shocking when he would say, and then he chopped them up and threw them in an oven or whatever, and they found 500 women, or not 500, but they found 40 bodies that they couldn't even identify, and you're holy shit, and they're just stating it like it's a fact or whatever. That made it kind of more shocking to me.
Like I said, I like the line work, and then it was pretty straightforward as far as a comic stance, the reading from panel to panel. But then every once in a while there was some really unique panels. I remember one in particular. There's the main action point in the center in a circle, and then there's like cuts of like then a big square around that, and like all these like triangular pieces around it. They're like,
oh yeah,
so
like a pie.
Yeah, there were a couple of those in there that kind of broke it up when something kind of major was going on, so that was kind of cool. I liked it. The artwork was really nice.
Yeah, he did. Have you ever seen his art that's his style before?
It looked familiar. Like it definitely, the caricatures had a familiarity sense to them.
Yeah, I thought so too. And I went and I looked up because I had a friend. I had a friend named Allison. You met Allison,
yeah.
And she has these 2 tattoos on her forearms of like kind of 20s era characters, like a flapper and a dapper man or something like that. And they were drawn in that same like liney style. So I spent like an hour trying to figure out who the artist was because I remember she told me and then I totally forgot what it was. And it was something that was very obvious. Like if you heard it, you're like, that's it. So I'd spent like an hour last night trying to remember what it was. And then I found it. It was Edward Gorey is his name. And I guess he does like, I think it's like children's book illustrations for like Gothic children's books or something. I don't know. It's either it's children's books or I'm putting that in there. I don't know if I actually saw an actual child's book, but it's got that feel. Like it's a little cartoony, but it's, yeah, maybe for adults, I guess. Yeah.
Young
but
adults, at least.
it's a little cartoony, but it's also like Gothic and weird and straight lines. And, I don't know. It was really precise and I liked it. But then Rick Geary's a little bit more cartoony. Like his facial expressions are more cartoony. Like he made H.H. Holmes look kind of like dopey sometimes, but then he's murdering people. So it was interesting. I liked it a lot, actually. Now, I had actually read some of his books already because I went to a Comic-Con, and I think it was the 2009 San Diego Comic-Con. And I think I had just happened to walk by his booth there. And he was signing and no one was there. And I was like, dude, that art looks really good. And so I just picked up, I think I have the Axeman of New Orleans. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll buy this from you. And like, would you sign it? He's like, sure. And then I read it and I was like, this is fucking awesome. But I think I bought it on the last day. So he wasn't there after, I couldn't see him anymore after that. But ever since then I looked it up. I'm like, oh, this is like a whole series. He just writes the same. And or at least the 2 that I read, this one and the Axeman, had like the same feel. There was no like weird change in tone or anything. So I like that. It's like a dry, you're just getting the facts, but then there's also like, it's a little bit cartoony. It's a good mix of everything. And it's a nice short 83 pages. So you could sit down for an hour and finish this book and be like, oh, I didn't know that about it. And it's kind of a good wrap up and details about it. So you never heard of this at all, right?
No, I've never heard of this murderer before.
But you never heard of the murderer?
No, not at all. And I thought that was weird because I grew up with my dad loving those kind of, those kind of stories. As far as like, I don't know how many times we would sit there and watch, the Ted Bundy files or Dr. G Medicine or Dr. G, not medicine.
Dr. G Medicine Woman.
Dr. G, and then other medical shows as far as like, grisly murders and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I got to know a lot of at least big, I guess 20th or 21st century American killers.
Yeah, I get that too. My wife loves all these forensic files and stuff like that. So I was never big on them when I was younger, but now I can't get enough of this stuff. So we will be reading a lot of different types of true crime and stuff like that. As you can see, we did Torso and now this one. And I'm down to do some more Rick Geary books just because they're nice and fun.
Definitely, yeah. We'll throw some more in there because I definitely enjoyed his style and I look forward to reading some more.
Yeah. So
he does some. I saw there was like the some of the other series. I saw he had ones on like Jack the Ripper and
he did Jack the Ripper. He even referenced that in this one. I think he used the same panel where there's like a knife, and I think he took it from his other comic and instead of redrawing it.
Yeah.
But then he does Lizzie Borden, and there was one I actually read. I don't know if I still own it. I used to own it. I don't know. I wouldn't have gotten rid of it. So, But it's called The Bloody Benders, and I would suggest we read that because I've never heard anybody talk about it before, and it's like a whole family that kills people. So, but it's set in like Oregon Trail times.
Oh,
so it's like, yeah, your wagon broke down. Come on to our farmhouse, and then like, where'd they go? But no one knows back then because you're talking about correspondence with letters and months in between. So if you don't get a letter from your son who went to go to the gold rush or something, you're like, well, it's been a year and a half. I should be there in another 6 months. Like, so yeah, you never know if someone died or whatever. You just hoped they were good back then. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a pretty basic book. There was one of the things I liked about this was there was a lot of characters, but he did a good job of like balancing them. Like, there's a lot of characters because H.H. Holmes fucked a lot of women. So he had a lot of wives that no one knew about each other.
At the same time.
Yeah, he married someone when he was younger, and then he would be like, you should go live with your mom and dad. And then he'd move to another city and be like, I'm going to go work over here. So he'd move to another city, and then he'd meet another lady and be like, you want to get married? And then he'd have a different name for himself for each of them, and just a big pile of we don't know who he is, but he's married to a lot of people, and then he had like the other weird thing, and this happens sometimes, and I don't understand it with the other true crime stuff I watch, is he'll meet people who are like down to like be part of it.
Yeah, I don't know where you meet these people, especially without like a Craigslist or things like that. A happenstance of like, hey, do you want to work at this place with me and help me cover up when I murder someone?
Yeah, when I murder someone, or like I think it starts off, and this might be because it was a different time too, but it starts off with him being like, hey, do you mind if like we do this insurance scam? And they're like, all right, I'll get like $50, which was like $800,000 back then. And and he's like, yeah, I'll send you that money. And then they do the scam, and then it's like maybe they're scared that if they don't go with him again on whatever the next escalation is, because he ends up having to like, here, bury this body. And it's like, where did this body come from? It's like, don't worry about it. I'm just, I'm a medical person. Because he actually had a medical degree.
He got a medical degree.
Which is ridiculous. He was a real doctor who would murder people and then sell their skeletons for, I guess, displays of anatomy teaching.
Well, wasn't the one thing I remember, he got caught on one of the insurance things and still had his medical license after that.
Well, this was before,
I know, and because of modern times, it's just like, wow, I can't believe he just was able to move on from it. But then he got better at covering his tracks, obviously.
And it's like you think about becoming like back in the day, you go to the barber shop and they'd also be a dentist. Like, let me cut your hair and knock out your teeth for you if you want. That'd be great. But it was kind of weird and funny to see how he did it. And basically, he was just able to get away with it because either people were bad at forensic science because it was not even a thing then, or he would just move around a lot so people couldn't keep track of him, and he'd change his name, so then it's not the same guy, So, and then when the cops finally did figure it out, it seemed like they did a really good job of figuring it out.
No.
I mean the Pinkertons. Like when the Pinkertons were tracking him down, they're like, we totally got it. Don't worry, we'll go to like every city and we'll figure it out. To which I was like, how did they do that back then? With no like forensics or internet or
just similar enough.
Yeah, I guess people paid attention to things more back then. Like, oh, I did see a man with a mustache, and I think that was him.
I liked when he moved to the place where he built the house. Because he went to work for the old lady in the pharmacy.
Oh yeah. So let's preface this. He
gets out of medical school.
Eventually, he gets out of medical school, and he's like, where can I go live?
He dumps off his first wife.
Yeah, he dumps off his first wife with her parents, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go to Chicago.
That's right.
And he met another wife there, and then also I think he had a kid with her too, and then he just was like, "You and the kid should go stay with your parents."
Yeah,
in the north side of town.
Yeah, they live on like the far, far north side of town, or like just the outskirts, I think.
Yeah, and so he was able to like, figure it out and murder people with her not even knowing, because she's like, I guess back then 20 miles was like 200 miles, so it didn't matter. So he started working in this pharmacy. And because he's like, oh, I'm a doctor.
Yeah. And the old lady was running it because her husband was the pharmacist, but he was also dying of like pancreatic cancer or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, and then he finally dies, and this whole time Holmes is taking over more responsibility because she's taking care of him, and then he dies, and then she's kind of distraught about that. So she's just kind of like, you kind of run things, and
and he basically just takes it away from her, and then. I can't remember. Oh, she died, right? Like, the other thing in the book, they didn't say that he actually murdered some of the people. He would just be like, and no one ever heard from her again.
Oh, yeah. They went to live in California with their relatives, I think. It
would just say H.H. Holmes, people were asking about this lady, and they came to her place of work, which was this pharmacy, and he'd be like, oh, Matilda, she told me that she was going to have fun in California. And then they would say, and no one ever heard from her again. So you're like, okay, either she did go to California and you don't know, or she did. And she probably did, because it's H.H. Holmes. Yeah. So, so he worked in this pharmacy, and then there was a plot of land across the street, and I was eyeing it for a bit. And I can't remember how he got the money, but I think he did like insurance scams. He did an insurance scam. And then he got enough money to buy the land. And it just so happened it worked out when... it wasn't the World's Fair. It was something like that.
Yeah, but it's a big kind
of
festival.
Big thing where they're like, "Hey, we have electricity, and it's like the only thing to do this year, and it's like a big tourist attraction in Chicago." And it just so happened that it was happening like 5 blocks from this place. So he was like, "I gotta build my murder castle before this thing happens, because all these people are going to be coming into town to rent."
And the crazy thing with that is that he designed the whole thing himself, and when he got contractors of people to come out and start working on it, he would hire them in spurts, like different groups, so like no one group could see the whole entire house being built. So it was amazing that, I mean, I know building codes were not like that.
There were no building codes back then. But yeah, I mean, you would think someone would be like, why do you have... And they even said, like, the people were like, it was weird that he had, like, trap doors or rooms going to nowhere. Or, like, he wanted gas lines to just end and have control valves. That they just end in a room into a, tenant room or whatever. And then he's got the control valve in his main office or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that would be a red flag. Like, why does he want to have natural gas piped into people's fucking rooms? Like... But I guess back then they're like, he's got a reason. I'm just here to get a paycheck.
Yeah, I got my money, so.
Yeah, it's America. Why would anyone do bad stuff or something? I don't know. I don't know what they would think back then, but not very. I think it was more of just like, hey, that's his business. Like, I'm sure if he's doing something bad, he'll get caught or whatever. But my job is to build this weird second floor or whatever, like. So, but yeah, he got away with it because he never had one contractor over everything. It would be like, hey, I need you to build 4 rooms. And then he would fire him and say, yeah, your workmanship's shoddy, and he wouldn't pay him. To which I was like, wouldn't that get around the builder community? Like if someone does something bad in my job, I'm like, oh, I'm never working for them again, or I'm never going to, call them for anything. But apparently back then that didn't happen as much, because if you didn't pay your bills, it would get well known around town for not paying bills. So, but yeah, so he built that castle very smartly, with a bunch of different contractors, and then
3 floors.
It's 3 floors. Yeah,
the ground floor was the new pharmacy, and I guess his place.
Yeah, he lived on the first floor.
Yeah, and then the second floor was all for tenants and
murder room,
and murdering. And then there were rooms on the 3rd floor.
I think there was room on the 3rd floor too, but there was weird stuff, like there was a shaft that went through the whole building.
Yeah, all the way down to the basement.
From the roof to the basement. And so it was 4 floors because there was a basement that no one knew about that had like human-sized furnace and like weird dungeon machines. Oh, and it said it even had a rack
Oh yeah, medieval rack.
Yeah, medieval rack. But it's like, why the fuck would you need this? You see the guys bringing the thing down there, and they're like, I don't know what this is. This is weird. I'm just gonna put it there and not tell anybody about it. So yeah, it was just weird that no one caught wind of this or cared to bring it up. And then back then, you know, like I said, no one's knowing like where. It's not like now where I got my phone. If my wife wanted to, she could be like, find my phone or whatever and figure out where I'm at or call me. But now it's like, or back then it was like, you can't, you know, you just, hopefully I'll get a letter in 8 months. I'm sure they're doing fine. So it's like a level of trust in the world or whatever that you have to have that is mind-boggling nowadays. But yeah, so then the fair happens, or the whatever it was, the exposition or whatever, and he rents a bunch of rooms. A bunch of people go missing. What happened? Oh yeah, I think he tried to like burn it down eventually.
Yeah, he was gonna
to get insurance money on it. It's like, my murder dungeon's worth at least $100,000. So, and then from then on, he just kind of is on the move, like moving everywhere, and he's moving with like his friend's family and
his third wife,
and his friend and him. His friend was like, he's like, hey, you go over here, friend, and do this like insurance scam with me, and I'll take care of your wife and kids. And then he like murders his wife and kids, and his friend doesn't even seem to care. Like, his friend found out that they died and wasn't like, wait a second. Like, a lot of people seem to go missing around you, Mr. Holmes, and I had to get rid of all these bodies. And he never puts two and two together the whole time. And yeah, so he just goes around, and eventually I think the Pinkertons find out about some insurance scam. That's what it was. Some guy was like, hey, he ripped us off. And then they eventually go to the Pinkertons, which back then were like the FBI kind of thing. And they eventually, really well, I don't know how they did it back then.
I think it just has to be you had to know most of them were reported. So they had to have, I guess, seen, because of the area he traveled, but it wasn't like too far. It was only across a couple states, really.
Yeah, but back then, that's like half of the known world or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, if you go from there to Oregon, you're like in Timbuktu, you might as well, you know, like it's so far, it's not easy to keep track of people, I would think. So, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It just seems like a long distance by, you know, horse and buggy and all that stuff. So, so he finally gets, you know, caught, and apparently he was just like, oh,
he was just ready for it. He's like,
you finally got me. Yeah.
You take me.
And then they were getting him for insurance fraud, and he confessed.
Only to 27? Yeah, 27 murders. But then they found at least 50 unidentifiable body parts in
the bottom of his
and they found
castle.
They found more body parts, like some random ones in some of the rooms, and
yeah, it was just weird.
Yeah, I read a couple of things in the book, in the after stuff, when I was talking about like, yeah, it's anywhere for reports of like anywhere from like 100 people to 300 something. Right.
Well, it said like because also at the time it's like, we got to sell papers, so they would blow it up too, but they don't know. It could be, you know, over 100. It could be over 50. It could be. It's definitely like, I think over 50.
I'm sure.
For sure. But yeah. So yeah, that's.
And one of the things that was cool about In Ring was like, this is one of America's first documented
serial killers. It wasn't called that back then, but yeah,
no, but yeah, and that's like, and because of that, that's why he's, I guess, like in my circumstance, like, he's not as well known. So he's one of the first, and because of how long ago it was, they've had so many, I guess, creepier, more specific ones since then. So he doesn't get the credit he deserves, quote unquote.
Well, this is a good way to find out about him, because it's like a nice, concise story that has just enough details to keep you interested, and like you can follow everything along, and then, you know, you can go read thicker books if you want to read it. There's one called White Devil in the City or something like that, by Eric Larson, and that's a really good one, but it gets detail. A lot, like half the book is about the preparing of the Exposition World's Fair thing. Because it's like it's juxtaposing him building his murder castle with them building their the World's Fair grounds or whatever. And so it was interesting, but it was like, all right, get to the murder part. This is why I'm reading this, not to learn about the architecture of the areas. So what was I saying? It was that's what I was gonna say. This was a good introduction to it because my first introduction to H.H. Holmes that I can remember was a Supernatural episode where they find out that some people were getting murdered in this one building, and it turns out it was like an apartment complex that was built on H.H. Holmes's that castle or whatever. So he's like murdering people, but he's like in the walls and shit, and he's a ghost, so it's like creepy and
that's cool.
Yeah, freaky. So it's a good episode. I think it's in like season 3 or 2 or something. But so yeah, that was fun. That was a weird, and I was like, who's this guy they're talking about? That was creepiest, one of the creepiest guys I've ever heard of. So that was how I've ever heard about him. But that's the story of H.H. Holmes. So as a comic, what would you rate this as?
I liked it a lot. It was solid. It was short, sweet, to the point. The line artwork was very pretty. It was very I think overall, so I think I liked the torso better, but I don't
because it's like a dramatized story.
Yeah. But I liked it. I like the true like crime aspect, and that is the whatever the story that they could say is true.
Right. And we're gonna have to grade them like on a bell curve on these because this is so much different than an actual than torso.
Definitely.
Or like a fiction. This is nonfiction, so it's gonna have a different feel.
Yeah.
But
I would read it again, and I would definitely recommend it. I would say I think because it's short and simple, I would put it a little higher because I would probably say an 8.
An 8? Okay, cool. I was gonna say 7.
That's what I was thinking, but I think because it was concise and short.
Yeah,
it's a quick read.
I would go with 7 only because it is like short and concise. It's fun. It's nice. There's that rhymes, but but it has like it's great for getting people into comics. Like you could give this to a kid, although this is like a bit of a harsher or heavy
a teenager.
Yeah, a young adult. A tween, and someone who likes Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark. Here you go, read this book. If you want to get into comics, here's like an interesting story, and it's interesting enough to keep their attention. The art's really good, so that's always a plus. The art is also really good, not just the way he draws, but the way he tells the story through the panels. Easy to follow. You don't have to like flip the book upside down and twist your head sideways to get it. So I would give it a 7 just because there was no drama because it is nonfiction. So there's I'm sure you could read something nonfiction that's just as compelling, but this just does a nice job, like a good job. It's better than a 5, better than a 6. So I'm going to have to say 7. So I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that wraps up another one.
Awesome. Well, see you later.
Take it easy.
Bye. Well, folks, hope you enjoyed that episode.
If you did and you'd like to follow us on social media, our Facebook is Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, and our Instagram is @Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, all one word.
And be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more recommendations to add to your weekly pull list.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.